Today is the 14th of December and we've been tidying up the nursery, and I came across this group which I placed in this growing box about 3 years ago and just let everything grow. It's a very rare type of Picea. I'm not a dwarf conifer expert. If you home in close, you can see how small the needles are. So it's a very, very rare one. I bought this group of 3 trees from a specialist dwarf conifer nursery, and I didn't know what to do with it, so I just put it together in this growing box. Several things I would like to say. First of all, why am I going to work on this tree in the middle of winter? Well, we have greenhouses here, and the UK weather is quite unlike the Midwest of America or even Canada, where they get very, very cold temperatures. Here, 2 weeks ago, we had -2 degrees was the coldest temperature at night, and it was that for maybe half an hour, and then during the day the temperature goes to about 4 or 5 degrees. Today we've got a mild spell, and the weekend is getting milder because the warm air from the Mediterranean is coming up, so we're going to get 12 degrees centigrade during the day and maybe about 5 degrees at night. So the temperatures are quite mild, but having a greenhouse, I can protect the trees that I work on. I try not to work on the roots, but I'm just going to try and work on the upper part of the tree, that means the branches and things. I hope I won't have to prune too much. So let us begin with a few comments like that. And as I said, this was growing in the nursery, so there's a lot of debris. All these leaves have fallen on the box or the pot. These are beech leaves because it was growing under a beech tree. But all these little points make a difference. If it was growing on the nursery, I wouldn't bother to remove these beech leaves, because these leaves acts as a blanket of insulation. It keeps the soil warm. It stops it freezing too hard. So because I'm now going to transfer it to the greenhouse, so it doesn't matter. But normally these leaves over the winter are a source of protection for the soil, and it all does it a bit of good. But having said that, I'm going to take it out of this growing box. These growing boxes are boxes that are used by retailers to sell goods, and they're chucked out, and I pick them up and I use them to plant my trees in. But because there are boxes the right size, I find them very convenient, better than a flower pot, because it's almost the shape of a bonsai pot. So having talked about the box and of the leaves, I'm going to now take it out of the box because I want to show you the root base. Or shall I do that? Maybe not, maybe not. I think you can see the root base quite well. Now, I planted it very roughly, the 3 trees together, and if I were to put it in a bonsai pot, it would look quite respectable. Let me show you the sort of pot I would use. There are so many different pots. We have these mica pots. If you take a bird's eye view, a low view from across there, so the tree would sit quite nicely in a pot like that. But I won't transfer it till probably wait till middle February when I do that. But let's trim some of the trees and see what we do with it. Now, although these trees have been grown together as a group, I'm going to analyze each tree very carefully to see whether planting them in a group is the best solution or not. So, although they are meant to be a group, I have to look at it carefully in case I change my mind and decide to use them as individual trees. I like to describe or narrate the thought process that goes through my mind. Now, if I were to use this in a group, I need to make these look like tall trees. But with these long branches, it doesn't make the trunks thick enough, and it doesn't give a proper sense of scale. So, I'm going to have to use thin branches to make them look okay. So, let me continue by describing my thought process. If I'm going to use it as a group, I'm going to have the use of short branches to make the scale look right. And they should look like proper big trees. These long branches don't make these trees look big. they don't make them look big, so they need to be shortened. But although I've planted them together to use as a group, if the trees individually could be styled in a different way, I might rescue it and use it for another purpose rather than use it as a group. So this is how I think. Just because I've done a certain thing, it doesn't mean it has to be like that. You can always change your mind. And keeping an open mind is very, very important. So keeping an open mind for anything, whether it's other aspects of life or as bonsai, the open mind habit is absolutely critical and crucial. So if I were to use them as a group, I will have to cut these long branches off. All these long branches are going to have to be cut off in some way so that I end up with short branches rather than long branches, because these long branches don't make these trees look big. So if I were to use these as individual trees, for instance, this tree on its own, I would have to wire these branches. Again, would I get a credible tree? I could probably get 3 separate tall trees. But again, I don't think I could use these long branches. And as a twin trunk, that fork over there is too high up, so it may not work so well as a twin trunk. If I were to use this as an individual tree, I don't think it has that much character. And even this tree on its own wouldn't have much character on its own. So having assessed the different options, I come back to the original decision, which at the time of planting was to make it into a group. Although I planted quite wide apart, a group needs to be quite tight. I may see and leave it like this and create something nice out of it. So, because it's leading the eye into the center with the central tree set back and taller, I had considered using this as the front. And if I use that as the front, I can use these as short branches like that. It might look quite nice. But that's a bit congested there. And this tree has this funny kink over here. There's no obvious leader, so looking at the tree from this side may not do justice to this tree. Let me see whether I can use the other side as the front. It may give me another perspective. If I were to use this as the front, you see, it makes it look more dense. It gets a different feeling. If I turn it around again, can you get a good view of the entire group? Okay, now if I turn it around this way, let's see which is better. And let's turn it the other way. I think viewing the tree from this side gives it more depth and perspective. So I prefer to use this side as the front. So straight away, my original conception has gone by the board. What I thought was the front is now going to be the back. Also, by doing that, this tree here on the right, which looked a bit funny, if we look at it like this, there's no obvious leader here from this side, but if I look at it from this side, it's not so bad, it's fairly straight. So another reason why I can use this as the front. Now the big decision comes, what to chop off. Because as I said, we cannot use these thick long branches like that because it doesn't give a sense of scale and proportion to the trees. So we need to head them back, shorten them to make them look more credible. By the way, because this is such a rare conifer, I'm going to keep these for cuttings. I love propagating. It's not so much saving money or being parsimonious or frugal. It's just that because this is such a rare variety of conifer, it is worth propagating just for the sake of propagating to retain the species nowadays there are very few specialist conifer nurseries. For those of you who are proper plants people, garden centers tend to sell things which the public like, and the fashion for dwarf conifers has certainly become less popular. It's waned, as they say. Let me just cut a little stub in case I need to make a gin out of it. This also is too long. It's also a bit too long. It's knowing when to stop. Okay, so that tree is looking like that, more upright. So that tree is looking reasonable. So we can use that one. One is tempted to try and complete that tree before I go to the rest, but I think I need to look at the tree in its entirety. Again, these branches are too low. I can keep a short one in case I want to make gin with that. These little dead twigs are not much use. Again, branches too long, too long. What a lot of cuttings. This twin trunk I'm reluctant to cut off because although it is forked like that, looking at it from the front makes it look like several trees together. So I'm going to keep it. Why get rid of it just for the sake of getting rid of it? I'm looking to keep the thin branches as far as possible, and I'm trying to shorten the branches so that it makes the tree look taller. So you see, I'm just shortening the branches, and also bearing in mind that I'm trying to keep an overall conical shape to the entire group. Already you can see some difference. You see, these two trees have been partly trimmed, so it looks quite different from the one on the left. So I have a rough idea as to what I'm going to do with this tree. And this tree, which is really faulty because of the twin being so high up, I can still use it. I'm determined to use it because for some reason it makes it look like two trees. So I have like double money, twice the value. That back branch, I'm always conscious that we need back branches to give perspective. If you cut everything off and have very few back branches, then the chances of creating depth is made more difficult. This long one I will think about in a minute because I haven't come to that yet. You can use ordinary bonsai trimming scissors, but when you get into the habit of using the Felco all the time, I prefer to use this tool. This is what I mean. You could use these if you so wish. They're equally efficient. In fact, some people prefer to use these. Each to their own. There's no right way, no wrong way. There's long as it works, that's fine. So you can see that the group has become refined to a large extent. I haven't touched the tree on the left very much yet. But what I will do now, I will start doing some wiring. Because once I start wiring, I will begin to get a better idea as to what the tree will look like when they're made into this group. In fact, I'm tempted to leave it looking rather natural rather than wire everything downwards. Where I can leave it looking natural, why not make it look natural? Too often people create bonsai looking so plastic and artificial that they cease to look like natural, normal trees. So I'm trying to avoid that syndrome. The plastic syndrome, I call it. I will just leave the odd little bit of gin. I certainly don't like making gin for the sake of making gin. There's certain people in bonsai, especially newcomers, they are so obsessed with gin that every tree has to have gin. I cannot understand it. You would think that they live in a very dangerous environment where there's lightning striking all the time. But just a subtle bit of gin here and there is okay, but certainly don't make gin for the sake of making gin. And of course, if it doesn't look right, don't use it. So that looks very natural, I would say. Now, how about this one? This one is a bit congested. By the way, these conifers take quite well to pruning. They do bud back if you prune them. I haven't touched this for about 3 years, but by pruning it, we're going to get more growth. And it will look more convincing. Now this tree I want to keep short. I want to have thin branches. So let me just see where I can get some thin branches. This one I might need to wire because the upward growing branches don't make it look so credible. Also, there's a branch kicking back onto that side. Again, as I said, I like to make things looking natural, so I don't want to just make trees look artificial with all the branches hanging down. Some branches can spring upwards. That's not a problem. My decision is wavering whether to use that back branch that's springing up. It doesn't look right. I can wire this down. Okay, I'm going to wire some of these down. I won't spend too much time doing it because it most important thing here is to show you the thought process and the main decisions I'm going to take. And once those decisions are taken, the technique of wiring can become very boring if you waste a lot of video time just showing me wiring it. I'll just show you one. When I have these bonsai workshops and classes, I observe how people hold their tools, and even the way they hold the gin pliers and all make a difference, you know. They hold it in a different way, but see, the object is to use the nose of the gin pliers like that, not in an awkward way. There's always an easier way of using tools. And then we're going to bring the wires down. As I said, I'm not doing all of them, but that was sprouting up too much, so I decided to do that one. That one I might even do that, because trees sometimes have twin heads as they go higher up. So I'm just trying to create the natural look. I'm going to wire some of these down like this, wire some of these down, and see how it shapes up. So I'm going to stop the video for a while I do some more wiring. As I say, the object is to bring these branches down like this. So give me a while I do this, and then we will revert to this. I've now done about 2 hours work, and you notice I've had a change of attire because it was about 5 degrees throughout the period I was working, and my hands were literally freezing. So I've gone in and put gloves on, put several layers on, and I've started doing again. So we've more or less completed this side, and there were some major decisions to take. This branch here, I didn't know whether to bend it down like that or not, but again, using my famous bag trick, I think without that branch, it is quite okay. In fact, it's quite nice like that. So although I could bend that branch down, the branch itself is much too thick, and I don't think it would look right. So I'm going to get rid of this. I don't even want to make a gin. Okay, this thick branch I've taken down. The other one which also can concern people, let's get rid of this and perhaps make a gin with that. So that goes off. Is this one on the side. Because this tree here is like a twin-headed tree, I decided to, just for the heck of it, go for that. Although I know I can easily do that, and it would look quite nice like that as well. So there are all these options, but I will keep that for now. It makes it look unusual. Okay, so now let's come to this side. So this side is the difficult one because it's got a lot of growth. It's got a lot of growth. I noticed that we cut a branch there, so it's forked into 3, so it's leaning back. I want to bring it forward, so I want to wire that, and I've already put some wire on. Let me complete it and I will show you what I'm going to do. The rest of the tree is going to be very, very interesting. As we say, watch this space, and I'm going to come up with several interesting ideas. The more I look at this tree and the species, it's perhaps more interesting than the spruce that the Japanese rave about so much. The needles are so much smaller than spruce, certainly a spruce, Picea of some kind. And as I said, because I'm not a dwarf or conifer expert, I can't identify it. I'm using 3.5mm wire here. Always use wire that is adequate for the job. If you use wire which is inadequate, it won't do the job. Okay, I put a wire on, so I'm going to bring this branch forward. It's leaning too much at the back. Make it look more interesting. And this is coming this way. This front one is going to be a gin, and I'm going to wire these ones. So there's some wiring to do. So I'm going to wire these branches. I won't show you the detailed wiring because it will just take up valuable video time. So I'm going to wire all these in the same way that I wired these. By the way, when I started the video, I said I wasn't going to wire these, but on reflection, I felt that with the branches hanging down, it gives it more of a realistic look. So I have in fact wired these branches all downwards. So I'm going to do the same with these. Rather than letting it go up, I'm going to wire them down like this. And then we have the problem with this. What do we do with this? But before I go too far looking at that, you see the tree could end up like this when it's done. But let's see where we go first. So I will stop for a while videoing, and I'm going to wire those and revert again. Just give me a second. So again, I've got some more choices to make. I've done some wiring there. There are quite a few extraneous or unnecessary branches. Right, now we've done that tree. Of course, we now are faced with the decisions about these branches here. What will I do with this one at the back? Should I use it or not? I might try and wire it and see what happens. But it's nice strong growth. I don't want to waste it unnecessarily. So let me wire those two and then place it in position, and then I'll decide about this. You must be thinking, what am I going to do with these long branches? Now, as we say, watch this space, because it's a very critical decision. There are so many things you can do. Very easy to just cut it off. But if I can save it, I will save it. So just be a bit patient and I will get to that. Let me just wire these two and see if it adds anything to the beauty of this group. A lot of it is trial and error. Unless you try, you never know. Now, we're reverting to what I consider the front. This is now my back, but it's quite interesting still. You know, it's one of those groups that look nice from either side. From this side, like that, without these, or that side. So whoever eventually buys this tree can have the benefit of either side. Either side. I will keep those for now. That's not too bad. Okay, now the critical question is this. What do we do with this? At this point, look at these are the branches that we've thrown off. I reckon I've taken off more than 50%. This is more like 60 to 70% of all the foliage that was on the tree. I said I wasn't going to repot, but because I have the greenhouse facility, I have the privilege of making choices that are not normally available to other people because I've got the protection. So I may take it out of the pot and see what happens. So I've taken it out of that growing box, and the root ball is still intact like that. So I can still play around with it and do whatever I want to do. But what I had in mind, rather than just waste that long branch on that side, let's put these two here. This is just very regular compost. It fits perfectly there. What I wanted to do is to utilize this as a mini raft and bring it up as a little tree. I don't know whether that would work or not. The thought is good, but let me just try it before I give up. So, see, it's growing in very friable bark, pine bark. Look at the beautiful roots. It's even got a bit of mycelium, although Pisceas don't normally generate mycelium. There are faint traces of mycelium there. This is the idea I had. I thought that if the branch was low enough, I could have bent this wire down like this, tie it to the surface of the pot, and get some mini trees growing. I might still try it. Nothing lost in trying. I'm using all sorts of trickery to manipulate this. This would eventually root itself, and it's like a mini raft. So you see what I've done already. I've pulled that branch down, touching the soil, and I'm now going to wire these up to make like small trees here. So like here, I'm going to make them into little trees. So give me some time to wire these up and we'll see what happens. So you can see I brought this branch right down. And what about these branches? They look a bit ungainly. I may hide it with a rock. So let's wire these first and then we will see what happens. So we'll stop the video while I prop these up and wire these into little trees. So we've got so far, these two are rather conventional looking trees for the group, but this one on the left hand side, I didn't want to waste this branch. There were two branches, this branch and this branch. So this branch I've anchored to the soil surface, and the plan is to let these branches grow up to make like a tiny raft in due course, but they haven't got enough structure to make them look like individual trees. But in the meantime, if I just left them there, they would look just like scrub, you know, like if you go into a forest, you'll find some brambles and small bushes growing there. So that's the effect I want to create. And this is very natural looking. You do get trees that grow in that way. So rather than have them all uniform, I've just let them grow quite naturally, quite casually, in fact. And I'm now going to cover the place with moss, and we will see what it looks like when it is complete. So give me another few minutes. So while Tracy is not putting the moss on the surface, I just say something about the soil. I've just come back from Taiwan, and in Taiwan they grow some very big trees, and they grow a lot of junipers and pines, and the soil there invariably is akadama and their own types of river grit. But this group of trees has been planted in almost pure leaf mold, and this is compost that we make by rotting down the leaves that we collect from under the trees. So this is just organic matter, and you see how healthy the tree is growing. So I know that there is always a case for talking about akadama and this very gritty soil, but this is by no means gritty soil. So I always remind people that whenever it comes to compost, you've got to go with the flow. See what your local people are using, and what works well for you in that situation is probably okay. You don't have to slavishly copy what everyone else does. What is done in one country doesn't necessarily mean would work in your situation. So I'm standing behind the camera and having a good look, and it's turned out quite interesting. I'm not sure we don't even need that rock, but let's see. If it doesn't, we will just cover the whole thing with moss. And that little grove is just a grove of trees that you would find growing in a forest normally, some small trees underneath the big ones. So this is a very natural looking forest, nothing contrived. It breaks all the rules. You see there's a twin trunk tree there, and there's a long sweeping branch to the side, and the tree on the right is also like a twin trunk, but it works. So after all the moss is laid, I'm going to turn the tree around, because I'm convinced that this tree looks nice from either side, either from this side or the other side. So here we are. We've now covered the surface in moss, and those little trees are growing like a little clump that you would find on a forest floor, almost like brambles growing through the trees, that long branch. And this is my preferred front, but if I get Tracy to turn it around 180 degrees, you will see the other side. This is what I started off initially as my preferred front. Also possible, but I must say I still prefer the other side. Both sides are nice. If you turn it back to the other side, that's my preferred front. Too much. There you go. So I hope you like what we did. Hardly any root disturbance. You just saw I didn't cut any root from the base. I just scraped some of this soil from the top, and it fitted quite well in this large mica pot, and it's virtually complete with moss. Such a natural looking group. So again, if I can point out, there's a twin-headed tree on the right, another twin-headed tree in the middle, and that tree on the left-hand side has that long branch sweeping to the left, and that other branch trailing on the ground, which will eventually root. So unconventional, but looks very natural, realistic, and I hope you've enjoyed seeing how this group was made and the choices that were open to me. So there